I can't believe it's been almost 2 decades since I started working for the Forest Service. It feels like just yesterday that I was a wide-eyed newbie, eager to explore the great outdoors. Over the years, I've had the opportunity to work on some amazing projects, from wildfire management to trail maintenance to habitat restoration. Each day brings new challenges, but also new rewards. There's nothing quite like the feeling of knowing that you're making a positive impact on the environment and the communities that depend on it. Of course, it hasn't always been easy. The long hours, the physical demands, and the unpredictable weather can all take their toll. But I've learned to adapt and persevere, and I'm grateful for the camaraderie and support of my colleagues. Also, I've encountered my fair share of several terrifying situations, especially this one incident that I faced during a fall few years back. It left me feeling traumatized for a long time afterwards. I don't feel comfortable talking about it to this day. It started out as a routine patrol. I was tasked with checking on a remote section of the forest that was known for its rugged terrain and difficult trails. It was the kind of assignment that I actually enjoyed, as it gave me a chance to get away from the hustle and bustle of civilization and immerse myself in nature. As I made my way deeper into the forest, the woods were eerily quiet, with no birds chirping or animals scurrying about. It was as if the animals knew that something was wrong and were hiding away. I had never experienced anything like this before, and it was unnerving. It was as if the forest was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I pushed on, determined to complete my mission, but as I turned a corner on the trail, my heart nearly stopped. There, in the middle of the path, was a gruesome sight that I will never forget to this day. It was the remains of a hiker, torn apart and scattered across the trail. The body was so badly mutilated that it was impossible to tell if it was a man or a woman. Blood and entrails were splattered everywhere, and the stench was overpowering. As I approached the remains, I noticed that the body had been ripped apart with incredible force. The limbs were twisted and contorted in unnatural positions, and the flesh had been torn away from the bones. The head was missing, and the neck had been snapped in two. The torso had been ripped open, and the internal organs were strewn across the trail. It was clear that this was not the work of an animal, but rather a brutal and savage attack by a human or group of humans. The sight was gruesome and horrifying. As I got closer, I could see that there were strange markings on the ground, as if something had dragged the body across the trail. There were also deep claw marks in the soil, as if an animal had been digging at the ground. As like any typical ranger, I quickly radioed for backup and reported the situation, explaining what I had seen. The dispatcher on the other end of the line sounded concerned and told me to stay put until help arrived. In the meantime, I took photos of the scene and made notes in my logbook, trying to piece together what had happened. Then suddenly I heard a noise, something like a child laughter. My heart raced as I heard that sound coming from the nearby bushes. I cautiously approached the area, my hand on my weapon, ready for anything. I shouted, "Hello, is anyone there?" But there wasn't anyone to be found. Then I heard it back. This time it was from much further into the forest, like whatever it is had moved further inside the forest. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. Should I follow the sound of the laughter, or should I stay and investigate the remains of the hiker? I knew that I couldn't leave the scene of the crime, as I was pretty much confused and shocked by the mysterious laughter. There was this gut feeling that told me not to follow the laughter, so I decided to head back to the scene. And then I waited for what felt like an eternity. The forest was eerily quiet, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. However, everything seemed normal and quiet, and there were no signs of danger. After about 30 minutes, I heard the sound of approaching footsteps. I turned to see a group of forest rangers making their way towards me. They were armed and ready for anything, and I felt a sense of relief wash over me. As they approached, I explained what had happened and what I had seen. They listened intently, and I could see the concern on their faces. They quickly set to work, took over the investigation, examining the area and searching for any signs of danger. So, I decided to head back to the ranger station with a mix of relief and unease. I managed to make it back to the ranger station, where I was debriefed by my supervisor and the local law enforcement. They took my statement and asked me a series of questions about what I had seen and heard. I told them everything, including the strange laughter that I had heard in the forest. After a thorough investigation, it was determined that the hiker had been attacked by a group of humans, likely a cult or some sort of deranged group. The incident left me feeling shaken and traumatized for a long time afterwards. And that laughter, it still haunts me to this day. I've tried to rationalize it, to come up with some sort of explanation, but I just can't. It was like nothing I had ever heard before. It was childlike, but also sinister. And the fact that it seemed to be coming from different parts of the forest just made it even more unsettling. I've talked to some of my colleagues about it, and some of them think it was just some sort of animal or bird making a weird noise. But I don't know, man. It just felt too intentional, too calculated. Like someone or something was trying to lure me away from the scene of the crime. I try not to think about it too much, but every now and then, I'll hear a sound that reminds me of that laughter. And when I do, I can't help but feel a chill run down my spine. It's like a reminder that the forest is full of mysteries and dangers that we can't always explain or understand. I've been a forest ranger for over 20 years now, and let me tell you, there are some pretty weird things that happen out here in the woods. I work in a rural southern area of Mississippi, where over 75% of the large county I'm in is national forest. The nearest town with more than just a gas station and a dollar store are about 30 to 45 minutes away in the next county over. Growing up and living my whole life surrounded by thick, deep woods, I can assure you that there are plenty of unexplainable things that occur, and more frequently than you might think. My parents had lived on our property for a decade before I was born, and my dad would tell me stories of weird, unexplained things that he had seen, heard, and experienced. Seeing strange, unidentifiable things in the sky, especially at night, is very common, but nearly everyone chalks it up to the military. The national forest in the area is used for training by nearly all branches of the military who operate out of the military base 20 to 30 minutes away or the Air Force base on the coast of Florida. But far more concerning, in my opinion, are the weird, unexplainable things that my dad, and even both of us together have seen and heard on the ground. From on our own property to driving through miles of woods to miles into the woods while hunting, hiking, or canoeing. Additionally, as part of the local volunteer fire department, familiar with the area, and having received basic training, anytime someone was reported missing in the area, we would help with search and rescue. And while we don't have mountains or snow here, I have had multiple experiences of both people, especially kids, disappearing from places and situations where it should be nearly impossible to vanish from, as well as adults/kids being found alive or deceased in impossible locations based on where they were last seen and or the time between when they were last seen and being found. Like in one case where a 60-plus-year-old man with health and mobility issues was found by some hikers over 20 miles from where he was last seen with some tough terrain and 2 deep creeks, and no trails between the 2 points just 2.5 hours after he was last seen. Despite having dogs with us, his trail simply stopped roughly halfway down a short, clear path leading to a spot that overlooked some waterfalls. Despite having no mental disabilities/issues and being medically cleared of anything like strokes or seizures, the man couldn't explain how he got to where he was found. Just saying that one second, he was slowly walking to look at the falls, and the next he was somewhere completely different in deep woods and only found the hiking trail by following the voices of hikers on it. While I've only once briefly seen any stairs beyond those in expected locations where old homesteads and plantation homes were located, all of which besides the one appearing normal, and with associated wreckage, and or with obviously intentionally planted trees/bushes/flowers around them. But most of the normal stairs are stone, and no more than 4 to 5 steps tall at max. The one abnormal one I glimpsed was at least twice that height, made of wood, and was in an old-growth area no home had even been built on. I've heard stories from other people, my father included, about finding such completely out-of-place stairs. And I was told such stories before it was common for people in the area to use the internet, and long before smartphones and Wi-Fi. Living out here, you are taught and or learn to listen to such feelings and instincts even when there are no obvious signs as to their cause, but especially upon seeing something impossibly out of place or unnatural. As anyone who has a lot of experience being out in the woods will tell you, your subconscious will pick up on subtle changes in the environment long before your conscious part of the brain can recognize them. In nearly every case where someone I know became lost, injuries, or someone we found through search and rescue who became lost or injured say they had a feeling they should do something, leave the trail, or enter a certain area which they dismissed, which had they listened to would have kept them from becoming lost or injured or not led them further into the woods away from civilization. Ignoring or dismissing your instincts anywhere but especially out here in the woods can get you lost, injured, or killed. But society increasingly teaches people to ignore and dismiss their instincts as nothing more than being paranoid, or as illogical, no matter how many times survivors report knowing or feeling they should stop, avoid an area, not trust or dismiss someone, etc. And yes, we are a highly evolved, knowledgeable, logic-based species, but that does not mean we should ignore the instincts or intuitions rooted deep within us. Our instincts and intuition are there for a reason, and they can often pick up on subtle cues and changes in the environment that our conscious minds may not be aware of. As I mentioned earlier, the national forest in my area is used for military training, and it's not uncommon to see strange things in the sky, especially at night. However, there are also plenty of unexplainable things that occur on the ground. For example, I've had multiple experiences of people disappearing from places and situations where it should be nearly impossible to vanish from. This is especially concerning when it comes to children, who are more vulnerable and less likely to be able to navigate the woods on their own. One particularly strange case involved a young boy who went missing while on a camping trip with his family. The area where they were camping was relatively open and easy to navigate, with no dense underbrush or steep terrain. Despite an extensive search effort involving multiple agencies and volunteers, the boy was never found. It's as if he simply vanished into thin air. Another case involved a group of hikers who reported seeing a strange, humanoid figure in the woods. They described it as being tall and thin, with long arms and legs and a head that seemed too large for its body. When they tried to approach it, it disappeared into the trees. While it's possible that this was just a misidentification of a known animal, such as a bear or a deer, the hikers were adamant that it was something they had never seen before. Of course, not all of the strange occurrences in the woods are so dramatic. Sometimes it's just a feeling that something isn't quite right. As someone who has spent a lot of time in the woods, I've learned to trust my instincts and pay attention to subtle changes in the environment. For example, if I'm hiking and suddenly the birds stop singing or the insects go quiet, I know that something is up. It could be a predator nearby, or it could be something else entirely. One thing that I've noticed is that people who are not used to being in the woods often underestimate the dangers and overestimate their own abilities. They may think that they can hike for miles without water or food, or that they can navigate by the sun and stars without a map or compass. This can lead to serious problems, especially if they become lost or injured. As a forest ranger, I've been involved in many search and rescue operations over the years. While we always do our best to find the missing person or persons, sometimes it's just not possible. The woods can be a harsh and unforgiving environment, and even the most experienced hikers and hunters can get into trouble. One thing that I've learned is that preparation is key. Before heading out into the woods, it's important to have a plan and to let someone know where you're going and when you expect to be back. You should also carry plenty of water and food, as well as a map and compass or GPS device. And if you're not familiar with the area, it's a good idea to stick to established trails and avoid venturing off into the unknown. In addition to the natural dangers of the woods, there are also some more supernatural or paranormal elements that come into play. For example, I've heard stories from other rangers and hunters about finding strange, out-of-place objects in the woods. One of the most common of these is a staircase, which may appear in the middle of nowhere with no apparent purpose or explanation. While I've only seen one of these staircases myself, I've heard enough stories to know that they're not just a figment of someone's imagination. Some people believe that these staircases are portals to another dimension, or that they're somehow connected to the paranormal activity that occurs in the woods. Of course, not everyone believes in the paranormal, and there are plenty of skeptics who would dismiss these stories as nonsense. But as someone who has spent a lot of time in the woods and seen some strange things myself, I'm willing to keep an open mind. In conclusion, being a forest ranger in rural Mississippi is not for the faint of heart. There are plenty of natural dangers to contend with, from venomous snakes to unpredictable weather. But there are also some more mysterious and unexplainable elements at play, from strange disappearances to out-of-place objects. As someone who has dedicated my life to protecting and preserving the natural beauty of the woods, I'm always on the lookout for anything that might pose a threat to visitors or the environment. And while I may not have all the answers, I'm always willing to listen to the stories and experiences of others, no matter how strange or unbelievable they may seem. As a retired forest ranger, I often find myself reminiscing about the adventures I had in the woods during my 30 years of service. From fighting forest fires to rescuing lost hikers, there was never a dull moment. But one memory in particular stands out in my mind, and it's not one that involves any kind of danger or heroism. It's a memory of a simple act of kindness that my friends and I did for some long-forgotten souls. It all started when I was patrolling one of my usual trails and stumbled upon an old graveyard about 40 meters into the woods. The gravestones were sinking into the ground, and the weathering on the stones was so bad that you could barely read the names. Most of them died in the early 1800s. It was clear that nobody had tended to this graveyard in years, maybe even decades. I knew I had to do something about it, so I gathered a couple of my colleagues and we went to work fixing all the gravestones that we could and pulling the sinking ones back up out of the ground. It was a lot of hard work, but it felt good to do something for these forgotten souls. After we were done, we notified some town officials and they cleared out a path to the graveyard so that people could visit and pay their respects. This memory came flooding back to me one sunny afternoon when I was grounded and couldn't leave the house through the front door. I decided to sneak out through my window and take a walk down that trail. It was a beautiful day, with a rainbow stretching across the sky. As I crossed the bridge that led to the other trail, I heard a strange noise. At first, I thought it was a cat meowing, but the sound was too robotic, too mechanical. I kept walking, and the noise grew louder and more persistent. I looked around, trying to find the source of the sound, and that's when I saw it. In the tall grass right next to the bridge was a figure. It was humanoid in shape, but it had no face. It was bald and featureless, and the sound that was coming from it was emanating from somewhere within its form. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what I was seeing, but I knew it wasn't right. I turned and bolted, running as fast as I could back towards my house. The figure didn't follow me, but I could still hear that strange, robotic noise echoing through the trees. When I got home, I was out of breath and shaking. I didn't know what to make of what I had just seen. I tried to rationalize it, telling myself that it must have been some kind of prank or an optical illusion. But deep down, I knew that it was something more. Over the years, I've thought about that experience often. I've talked to other people who have had similar encounters in the woods, and while there are no clear answers, there is a sense of shared understanding. The forest is a mysterious and powerful place, and there are things out there that we may never fully understand. But despite that encounter, I still feel a deep connection to the woods. It's where I spent most of my life, and it's where I feel most at home. And while there may be strange and unsettling things lurking in the shadows, there are also moments of beauty and grace that make it all worth it. As I sit here now, reflecting on my time as a forest ranger, I am grateful for the memories I have and the experiences that have shaped me. And while I may never know the truth about that strange, faceless figure in the woods, I am content to let it remain a mystery, a strange and eerie reminder of the unknown depths of the forest. I didn't know what to make of the faceless figure that I saw in the grass that day. It was something that defied explanation, something that I couldn't rationalize away. But it was also a reminder that the forest is a mysterious and powerful place, full of wonders and terrors that we may never fully understand. Despite that encounter, I still feel a deep connection to the woods. I know that there are things out there that we may never fully comprehend, but that doesn't diminish the beauty and majesty of the forest. It's a place where we can connect with nature and with ourselves, where we can find peace and solitude in a world that often seems too busy and too loud. And I remember the graveyard, with its weathered gravestones and forgotten souls. It was a reminder that even in the midst of all the beauty and majesty of the forest, there are still those who have been left behind, whose stories have been lost to time. But for a brief moment, my friends and I had given them the respect they deserved, honoring their memory and giving them a place of rest. As I sit here now, reflecting on my time as a forest ranger, I am grateful for the memories I have and the experiences that have shaped me. And while the memory of the faceless figure still haunts me, it's the memory of the forgotten graveyard that gives me hope. It's a reminder that even in the midst of all the beauty and wonder of the forest, there are still opportunities to show kindness and respect to others, to honor their memory and give them the dignity they deserve.